me, and I know that to be true. There's times in our lives when we feel like others may be finished with us, and we may be finished with ourselves. You ever been there? But the Lord's never finished with us. Even as we move into the new heaven and the new earth, it will be a consistent growing with no obstacles. That's a great day. Anybody look forward to like growing without all the obstacles and all the issues of yourself? Man, I look forward to that. And one of the issues in our current culture, in our current human experience in the Western world, a Gallup poll did a survey, and this was actually before the virus that we won't speak of. And it was determined, they were looking at loneliness, and here was basically this was the theme of their, the thesis of their findings, was that Americans are of the most lonely people in the world. This was before COVID. Americans are of the most lonely people in the world. That's bizarre and hard to even wrap our minds around, but if you think about it, long term and historically, as we see the overarching trends within American history in itself, there's a great book called Tribe by Sebastian Junger, and in that book he maps out the 18th century and this concept, this thing that showed up in the early 1800s of one-way, what he called one-way traffic. And so what you had is along the northeast coast is you had two drastically different cultures living together in the same area. You had indigenous people, natives living in the woods and out, and they were basically living as if they had for 1,500 years. And then you had this progressive British, mainly white culture that had moved in, this colonization culture that had moved in. And what you would think is that as the indigenous people watched the progressive people, they would want to get in on that game. They would want to move into that society, and actually the exact opposite happened. In fact, we don't have any record of anyone willingly coming from the indigenous and moving into a progressive culture of that day. Not one record. But what we do have is plenty of people who were leaving the progressive culture of the 1800s, the apex and center of civilization, moving from that out into the woods to live with these indigenous people. Strange findings. And this is the quote: "The intensely communal nature of the indigenous tribes held a appeal that material benefits of Western civilization could not necessarily compete with." The community that was developed, the communal nature of the indigenous people's experience and the way they lived their life. In fact, Benjamin Franklin actually writes a letter to one of his friends. You can find it online and read it. And he talks about how these, there was tribes warring and different things against the Western civilization and people that were there, and they would take white British people captive and take them back. And then the white people's families would then go and ransom their people back out of these native tribes and bring them back, and they would show them love and try to integrate them back in. And what was happening was those people eventually, even though they were stolen and taken, not willingly, but taken into that, they would eventually just leave the Western and go back and live with the indigenous people. Ben Franklin was like, what do you do with this? He said they were captured by the indigenous people, and even when they were ransomed back, loved ones would treat them with unimaginable tenderness to prevail with them to stay among the English, but within a short time, They became disgusted with our way of life and would most often escape back into the woods with the indigenous. There must be something in their social bond, something singularly captivating and far superior to anything to be boasted of by us, is what he said. Another wild fact, studies have shown in London during the London Blitz of the Nazi regime, what they discovered was depression actually went down during the London Blitz. And then after it was over, it rose back again to what we would normally call normal levels. So the question is, did the Londoners just like being bombed by Nazis? Was that happier times for them? Of course not. What it created was a community, a communal nature where we're stronger together, right? You remember when the fires happened in Gatlinburg, there was a Facebook page, Gatlinburg Strong. And the whole idea was, let's unite together. And there was this whole communal push where we're like, Gatlinburg Strong, all right, Philly Strong. There's been, and we've seen these trends over and over and over and over and over. But the reality is, in our current culture, and even with the virus that will not be named, it has accelerated the loneliness problem in our culture. It just has. And so the question then is this, we're talking about rhythms and routines in our lives. Is there a routine or a rhythm in the way of Jesus as we look and read in the Gospels and look at Jesus' life and the way he chose to live his life the Roman people were an extremely progressive people. In that same type of cultural thing, what did Jesus choose to do? Was there a routine and rhythm that Jesus did in his life that could help us compete and stand in contrast or counter to our current culture in which we live in, which is breeding and multiplying loneliness, which then results in a whole slew of other things that I may talk about in a moment? And my answer to you is yes, Matthew chapter 5. So if you have a Bible, find your way to Matthew chapter 5. Feel free, if you ever need to use the table of contents, there's no shame in that. Get there as quick as you can. If you just open it up to the middle and don't go to Matthew 5, go to Luke chapter 5. Sorry. I've done this like 3 times. Even in my notes, I kept typing it as Matthew 5. And I knew it wasn't that, but I don't know. Luke. So head over to Luke, New Testament. You got Matthew, Mark, Luke. It's the third one. Just hang a right if you find the New Testament. Luke chapter 5. And so what we're going to think about is a routine, a rhythm. Some could call it a practice or a discipline or, here's what I like to call them. Just ways of living. Just a way. And interestingly enough, the first Christians, they weren't called Christians, they were called people of the way. Because the way they lived their life is just different, man. It was just different than anything that the culture had seen up to that point. And it's because they were modeling the best they could their life after the way of Jesus, which is what we talk about around here all the time. So if you've found your way over to Luke chapter 5, we like to say word around here, so say word. Let's get into the word so the word can get into us. Verse 1. As the crowd was pressing in on Jesus to hear God's word, he was standing by Lake Gennesaret. Now he saw 2 boats at the edge of the lake, and the fishermen had left them and were washing their nets. So they had finished their work for the night, okay? And so he got into one of the boats, which belonged to Simon. And he asked him to put out a little from the land. Then he sat down and was teaching the crowds from the boat. And when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let down your nets for a catch." Now, Simon, also known as Peter, He's like, Master, he replied, we've worked all night long and caught nothing. But if you say so, I'll let down the nets. That was like those moments when you're asked to do something and you just want to state your information and skill and tact in that thing and your knowledge of knowing that it's not going to work out. And you're just going to state that so when it doesn't work out, you can be like, I told you so. Yeah, here's Simon trying to get one up on Jesus with the I told you so on Jesus. Listen, just like this isn't in the notes, but never set Jesus up for an I told you so, because you lose every time, right? Now, when they did this, they caught a great number of fish and their nets began to tear. So they signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats so full they began to sink. Now, when Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees. So now he went from setup to worship. It's like, no more trying to get Jesus, outsmart Jesus, be the wise guy on the boat. Jesus is the wise guy. He fell at Jesus' feet and said, "Go away from me because I'm a sinful man, Lord." For he and all those with him were amazed at the catch of fish they had taken. And so were James and John, Zebedee's sons, who were Simon's partners. And Jesus said, "Don't be afraid." Jesus told Simon, "From now on, you will be catching people." Then they brought the boats to the land and left everything and followed him. Now, what I want you to do is turn a page maybe or just look over. We're going to jump over to verse 27 of chapter 5. Verse 27. After this, Jesus went out and saw a tax collector named Levi sitting at the tax office. And he said to him, "Follow me." So leaving everything behind, he got up and began to follow him. Then Levi hosted a grand banquet for him at his house. Now there was a large crowd of tax collectors and others who were guests with them. Notice that. Who were guests with them. But the Pharisees and the scribes were complaining to his disciples, Jesus' disciples, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" Jesus replied to them, "It's not those who are healthy who need a doctor, but those who are sick. I've not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance." This is the word of the Lord. Let's pray together. Father God, we love you. We thank you. Speak to us this morning about community and the rhythm of community that you had in place. We trust you. We thank you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So, in that first portion, here's the big statement that I want you to think about. Jesus had a rhythm of pursuing and engaging new relationships. He had a rhythm of pursuing and engaging new relationships. It's the idea of being sent out to go. And in this first scene that we see with these first disciples, they're out fishing. They're tired. You ever had somebody come up to you when you're tired and try to engage you relationally, for the first time, and you're just kind of like, I just want to go home and sleep, rest, veg out, watch Netflix, whatever. It's challenging, isn't it? You ever think Jesus could have been more tactful at his timing and when he showed up to be like, "Hey guys, follow me"? But I think he was showing us something here. Because what we would do is be like, what we got to do is be strategic about how we approach people in new relationships and actually go out. And Jesus here was strategic. He was strategic at maybe going at the most exhausted, tired, most abrasive time to actually engage somebody relationally. And he was like, "Hey, when the presence of God is with you and you're engaging for the right purposes, listen, relationships will develop. I'm trying to create in you a rhythm of pursuing and engaging new relationships." See, what we have a tendency to do is drift into this comfortable way of being, this comfortable rhythm of life where the relationships that we have, we're good with, and we're like, it's all good, bro, I'll just keep these. I don't need no new relationships. I'm just going to stay in this that I have. And I'm going to get to that, and that's not bad, and that's good. It's a default position for a reason, and there's great things that should come from that. However, what I want you to notice is that Jesus is constantly engaging new people to have new relationship with them that he does not have. And it doesn't matter the time necessarily. As I said, it's maybe the most convenient time. And notice that he doesn't just stop when it gets a little challenging, right? When there's a little cynicism in Simon Peter's communication back. He's like, hey, man, let's get in this boat. Let's go out here. And he's like, all right, man, I'll do that for you, but don't, okay, fine, we'll do this. And we'll go out here. I'm tired. I'm trying to watch all this. You can see all this. Like, it's not in the text, but like you can just put yourself in there and like understand all of the things that are happening. And he's out there, and now Jesus does all this teaching, and they're still tired, and they're like, it's great teaching, some of the best teaching I've ever heard. Yeah, that's true, but I'm tired, and I would like to go finish washing these nets so we can go get some rest. And then Jesus is like, no, we're not going to rest. Let's just go back out there and do some more fishing. It's like, going through Peter's mind, he's like, first of all, you're a rabbi. Like, rabbis they teach people. Like, that's what they do. And maybe Simon knows a little bit about Jesus at this point and has heard some of the rumors and the stories. Oh, that's this rabbi who didn't go through all of the schooling that many rabbis would go through. Oh, this is that guy who's a carpenter, a brick mason most likely of some sort. He's like, I don't need no brick mason rabbi telling me how to fish. We've been fishing all night. I ain't caught nothing. Opposition to relationship, right? And yet Jesus just presses on, doesn't he? It's as if Jesus isn't necessarily worried about people pleasing or anything like that. Like he has greater things in mind for this relationship. He sees past all the surface level issues that are going on in that specific interaction. He looks past all that and he sees an image bearer of God. And he's trying to engage with that. See, so oftentimes the reason we don't engage people and pursue new relationships and have a rhythm of that in our life is because we already in our head know that person, don't we? They say this thing, look like this, dress like this, come from this culture. We don't need to get to know them. We already know. We can write out their whole bio for them. And so we just move right on past. And that was no doubt true for Peter. Jesus could have wrote his bio. Well, let's get real. It's Jesus. He knows us better than we know ourselves, right? As one theologian said, the Spirit of God is closer to you than your skin. Think about that for a minute. And that's absolutely true. He knows you better than you know yourself. And yet, with all of Peter's issues and trappings and challenges, Jesus continues to pursue and engage developing a new relationship with him. This doesn't just stop with Jesus. I could go on and on and on. But Jesus goes to the Gerasene, the guy who, y'all have heard me say this multiple times, but this is one of those stories that just I just can't get away from it. Jesus goes, actively pursues, and engages a naked dude in a graveyard. What? That's the guy, they've chained him up, he can't be chained, and he feels comfortable in a graveyard. That's just strange. And Jesus, we find him sitting down with that guy and having a conversation. Pursuing and engaging in new relationships. It was a routine. It was a rhythm. Jesus, another big famous one, right? Jesus goes out of his way to Samaria, to the well, and meets with this woman. actively pursues, goes to the well at a time where other people's not going to go to the well. Like, it's just really, really strange. Like, it's not conducive. Like, you're not going to meet, at this time, you're not going to meet the most reputable people at the well. And yet Jesus goes straight in there, right? But then it continues not only in Jesus' life. Think about Philip. Think about Philip. He's praying, and then God just like picks him up. Maybe the only person ever to teleport. Picks him up, teleports him over to this Ethiopian who's on his way back from Jerusalem to Ethiopia. And Philip's like, whoa, well, that's cool. I just did the whole Willy Wonka thing, and here I am. And I'm not small, though. I'm like full size, so that's good. And now there's this Ethiopian here, and he's reading an Old Testament scroll. I'm going to engage with him. Hey, man, do you know what you're reading? No, how would I know unless somebody explains it to me? And here we go. Like, God wanted this to be the rhythm of his followers so much that he teleported a human being across time and space to another place to meet with an Ethiopian eunuch. And if I could just, like, we could just camp out here, because what happens is like, apparently that guy goes back and like plants churches and starts making disciples, because where he goes back to, this area of Ethiopia, becomes one of the hubs for the first church of sending out theologians. It's unbelievable. But not just Philip, Peter, right? Peter's chilling up on top of his house, a friend's house, and he's praying and sleeping, and then he has this vision of all these animals, and then, hey, we're from this guy named Cornelius. He's like this Roman guard centurion dude, and I don't know, man. He was praying, and God told him to send us down here to get this guy named Peter. Is he here? Yeah, that's me. Let's go. God sends dreams to Cornelius, a Roman, and Peter to instill this reality, at least in part, of you need to have a rhythm of engaging new relationships. Think about Paul. Paul goes into Thessalonica. He's preaching and starting churches. Y'all, if you read about this, it's just bizarre. The first 3 followers of the way there is a Roman centurion who's basically a prison guard. So he's a blue-collar soldier guy, right? Just trying to take care of his kids and his family and his wife. A Lydia, who is a dealer in purple cloth. She clearly, from history, has 2 homes, one in Thyatira and one in Thessalonica. So she got money. She's well known. She's well connected. So we got the blue-collar guy. We got the businesswoman who's wheeling and dealing in the most modern fashions of the day. And then a slave girl who was possessed by demons and being used to make money by her ability to speak the fortunes of other people. These are the 3 people who come together to make the first church. And you want to talk about a ragtag bunch that has all kinds of issues of why they shouldn't be together and be in relationship with. And Paul's like, this is going to be the crew who starts this church. It's like, what, Paul? You should be more strategic. And Paul would say, I am. Because unity and community is not based necessarily and primarily on our similarities. It's not uniformity. It's unity in Christ. And when Jesus becomes the center and his way becomes the driving force and mechanism of the deep deepest parts of our soul. Doesn't matter how different they look, what culture they come from, whatever, what language they speak. If Christ is there, like we're linking arms and loving one another. Engage in people, in new people, in relationships. Don't fall into the trap and lose the rhythm of engaging and deepening relationships, in new relationships. Here's part of the thing that happens. When we stop engaging in developing new relationships with people that we're interacting with on a daily basis, what happens is we become more and more and more isolated and rooted in the way we think. Because most of the time, the people around us and the people that we interact the most with, it's almost like what's been called an echo chamber. We all think we kind of have the same thinking and the way of viewing the world, which is called a worldview. We kind of have all that. And so we can, man, it's like it's a burrowing into our defensive position is what results. And it seems as though Jesus was very, very few times was he defensive. He was mostly defensive with the Pharisees, the religious people, the group that should have been his closest folks. He was defensive with them. He was on the offense with people far, right? The lepers who he wasn't supposed to touch, Jesus would go touch them. Jesus, you can't do that. Yeah, I can, because their brokenness don't get on me. My goodness gets on them. And so when we have this sinking back into our echo chamber and sinking back, and we don't have a routine of creating new relationships and pursuing and engaging in new relationships, we get on the defensive, and we're where Jesus was moving towards and pushing towards, and his followers did the same. They pressed into the world, and they went. They were sent. They were a sent people. Part of walking the way of Jesus is becoming a sent person, a person who goes. Now, I also said, though, that there is a pause before I jump into that. I read you these two scenes because you have Jesus calls these fishermen, and it's like, oh, okay. They're a ragtag bunch, kind of rough around the edges, and, they're blue-collar workers grinding it out in their family businesses. And, they got some discipline. They got some things, and they're probably trying to live according to the Torah as much as one can as fishermen. But then, just like have this one little story of teaching, and then the very next thing, Jesus walks by a tax office, and he's like, yo, Levi, come follow me. Come follow me. And so Levi, Matthew, all right, leaves the tax office and says, I'm following Rabbi Jesus now, this Nazarene. I'm walking with him. But now you have these fishermen who've been paying taxes to this guy for a while. He's the one that's been robbing and taking and making a profit off of them unjustly and fueling the insurrectionists, the Romans who were there. And then Jesus takes them all to Matthew or Levi's house and brings other tax collectors there to have a dinner. Jesus is saying, hey man, this isn't just a rhythm with one person at one time. Like, you need to have a rhythm of engaging new relationships with people that you have kept at arm's distance. You need to do that. It needs to be part of who you are. A rhythm and a practice. And here's the deal. Before anybody jumps off ship. This is not a means, because what happens sometimes is people take that and they're like, yeah, we need to be in the world. And what they mean is like, oh, so I'm going to go out and live unrighteously and like carnal. That's not at all what Jesus is saying. And that's not at all what his followers did. He doesn't show up to this party over at Matthew's house and start just doing what they're doing. No, he's there, but he's doing what he's always been doing, living righteously. And when we're able to do that, what happens is there is a compelling nature to the way in which we live our lives. This is why one of our core values is called compelling community. What we're longing for is to be a community of people who are in the world, not of it, engaging the world with a way of living that doesn't result in loneliness and depression and anxiety and all of the things that flow from that. This is a place where friend and family lines get blurred. It's our homes, hear me, our homes should be a place where the line of host and guest gets blurred. And when somebody from the outside comes in, they're like not really sure whose home it is. I love going to Tim's house when we do the older couples growth group, because we'll come in and like, it's not Mitzi's house, but Mitzi will be like, come on, right over here is the chips and dip. And like, if somebody wasn't ever there, like it was their first time coming in, they would just be like, I guess this is Mitzi's kitchen, you know? But the lines of friends and family has become so blurred that it doesn't matter. Like, yes. Are you friends? Yes. Are you family? Yes. The lines between host and guest, it's blurred. Is this your home? No, but yes, I'm at home here. So what do you mean by that? Is this my home? Sure, these people are my home. This is the type of culture that was developed in the first church. And it was a culture that wasn't rooted in their similarities. It was rooted in Christ. Remember the three that started the church in Thessalonica? It was a poor slave girl, the woman who was selling all the clothes to all the rock stars of the day. You know, I don't know who's a clothing designer now? I don't know these things. Kim Kardashian. All right, did she design clothes? Maybe. Okay, and then it was like a military guy working. No, she doesn't design clothes. Just move on. We're just moving on. Okay, all right. I don't know any clothing designers. Here's the deal. Here's my clothing designers. Whoever designs clothes for Kroger and Sam's Club, because that's all I wear. All right. So my point is that this idea of having a rhythm of pursuing and engaging new relationships, what ends up happening is, man, you begin to really rely on Jesus and who he is and what he's about rather than what you're about. And you make friendships based on what he's about rather than what you're about. And you engage people. And it's not on your timeline. Right? So many of us come with our own agendas into these relationships, trying to do this and that. And it's like, just be with that person, live righteously, continue engaging with them, and watch God work. Watch God work. Treat them like friends. Treat them like family. And then the other thing is, Jesus has a rhythm of pursuing and engaging in deepening of relationships. In deepening of relationships. He engages constantly, has a rhythm of engaging new relationships and deepening the relationships that he currently has. And we see this. So he's developed, right? He's developed this relationship with Peter, James, and John, and now Levi. And now what's he doing? He's actively engaging in deepening those relationships, not only with him, but also with one another. Right? Can you imagine Peter, James, and John sitting in there at that table with all them tax collectors? Like, what conversations are they going to have? right? What that does is that draws Matthew or Levi really close because they know him a little bit now at this point, and they're like, hey, bro, you got to help us navigate this whole world that you've been a part of for a long time. And Jesus is showing them their need for relying on one another. They have a reliance on one another. And when you rely on one another, there is a deepening there. One author calls that leading with vulnerability. Leading with vulnerability. Think about the vulnerability that both of these groups, Peter, James, and John, and Matthew himself, were in at this moment. Matthew had just left the tax office. He's no longer in their group. He's now following a rabbi. And he's invited all of these over. That's a very vulnerable place to be, isn't it? Imagine the vulnerable state that Peter, James, and John are in. Like, let's just be honest, they hate those guys. Those guys are the worst. That's the ones when they're out fishing and they're tired and they're exhausted, they're like telling stories about what they would do to them if they caught them in a back alley or something. It's very, very vulnerable. And here's what happens. Rebecca Lyons talks about this. When you lead with vulnerability in the deepening of relationships, what actually happens is this, what used to be called, I'm not even going to go there. It's the moment where you're like, you too? Right? We've talked about this before too, but like you have this interaction with somebody and they tell you their story, and the people are different and the situation's different and the outcome's different. But when you hear it, you're like, dude, the same thing happened to me, except it was a different place and the people's names were different and they looked different and it wasn't this, but it was that. But it was basically the same thing. And you're like, everything connects and you're like, oh man, you too? Yeah. And then there's this deep connection that's developed around the fact that there's vulnerability. Both of you have shown vulnerability in areas of need or areas where there is reliability needed for one another and for that relationship. And then it deepens and strengthens that relationship. No doubt this moment happened for Peter, James, and John and Matthew in this state where they both were vulnerable. Jesus has a rhythm of pursuing and deepening relationships. Think about it. It doesn't just end with Jesus. Like this becomes the nature of the disciples. Paul, right? Like just read Timothy, 1st and 2nd Timothy. And just read any of the epistles of Paul and how Paul talks about the relationships and the people that he's engaged with on his missionary journeys. Like, he is like imploring at all times that the people in these different cities take care of his boys and his ladies that are with him and have been with him, and he's developed deeper. He's like, when they come to you, like, bring them in and deepen your relationship with them. Take care of them. The line of host and guest should be blurred. The line of friend and family should be blurred because they are family. Read how he writes about Onesimus. And it's mind-boggling in Philemon, how he talks to this guy about his brother that he's met. And I want you to think about this for a moment. Jesus is on his way to a cross. Fast forward in the story of Jesus. And these Jewish people, these Roman soldiers, they enter into a garden. And they take Jesus captive. And he lets them. And he begins his journey through a trumped up trial and a whipping that he didn't deserve and a death that he definitely didn't deserve. And where's his followers? The ones that he had developed deep relationships with. they're scattered. They're scattered. But then there's this scene in Acts chapter 2, Pentecost, where they're all gathered. And I can't help but think that they begin to think this. When we were at our worst, we were scattered. We were separated from one another. And so for us to be at our best, it's to be gathered, to come together and work together. And then what they do is they begin to branch. Like this happens so much that God actually has to allow persecution to happen in Jerusalem so that they will then scatter again. Because they get so with one another and like, hey, this is us, and we're not scattering again. We're linking arms and we're together. We're not going to leave a brother behind. And then Jesus is like, yeah, but what I want you to do is like actually take that mentality and go out and scatter and create other groups that won't break apart. And they do that so much so that it's only through persecution that they scatter. And then the wheels start turning and they're like, oh, yeah, you created this community and this way of being in us so that we would then go out and create these other little pockets of groups who are so linked together that we are engaged in pursuing constantly deepening of relationships where it is not just for our benefit, but it is for the benefit of others. At the cross, they were scattered. At Pentecost, they were gathered. So here's my point, and here's the thing that I want you to hear. To be with him, you have to be with them. To be with him, you have to be with them. There is none of this. Like I know, and I hear it all the time. Yeah, I follow Jesus, but I don't go to church. I'm not a part of a community of followers of Jesus. And I'm like, then you're not following Jesus. By definition, that's part of it. And I'm not telling you that because I'm a pastor and I pastor a church. I'm telling you that because that's what Jesus did, and that's what he engaged in with the world and said, this community. And here's the deal. Is it perfect? No. Are you going to get hurt? Yes. Is this pastor standing on this stage going to hurt you in some way? Absolutely. Already have. Just go around and ask some people. But you know what also happens? Is when we press in and create a rhythm of deepening our relationships, those hurts that we give one another, when we work through it and we reconcile, our relationship is deeper and we've learned both sides. And we've become better. We've become more like the image of Christ. So it's not from running from it or isolating yourself that you actually experience Jesus. It's through pressing into the challenges and dynamics of relationship. The idea is connectivity and community. Jesus had a rhythm of connectivity and community, engaging new relationships constantly and deepening the relationships that he has consistently. This is the way. There's no way around it. There's no way around it. So, here's what I want to do. It's way past time. Here is a couple of things. Practical things, okay? Tangible things I'm going to try to help you with. Be the friend you wish you had. When you're engaging new relationships, like be the friend that you wish you had. Think about this question with that, along those lines. What are the qualities of the ideal friend? And how could I be this to another person? How could I do that? Be the friend be the friend that you wish you had. Think about that this week. I've already mentioned one, lead with vulnerability. It's this closeness happens. It's the result. The result of closeness is Closeness is the result of mutual vulnerability. Did you hear that? Mutual vulnerability. When that happens in a relationship, closeness follows every time. This is sort of a controversial movie, but there's this scene, and I want you to just look past all of the other stuff. But there's this scene in Forrest Gump where Forrest and Bubba are in a trench, and it's been raining forever. And it's such an incredible picture because, like, you should be uncomfortable and mad and hating the situation and just frustrated. Not to mention, this is set in a time when blacks and whites were like, the civil unrest that was going on in America, and then they were like partnered together in like a war there was all types of war going on about that and whether that was okay and all of these things. And you see these two guys, and Bubba just says, man, lean on my back and I'll lean on yours so we ain't got to sleep with our head in the mud. Like, when you lean on one another and show vulnerability, hey, you know what I need right now? I need a back to lean on. And when you look at how they film that, it's incredible. There's all these guys that are by themselves and they're like got their head leaned up in the mud. And then there's them two sitting right in the center, leaning on one another. And you know what else? If you don't just pause it there and just ponder that moment, all them other guys don't have anybody watching their back. And both of them are watching each other's back. Like, just come on. Like, how simple of a picture. How simple of a picture when you accept the vulnerability and the vulnerability of your state and just unite together and say, hey, we're not going to sleep with our heads in the mud. Here's a practical thing. Open porch is what it's called. Elizabeth was sharing with me about this study and these ideas that had come up like ever since the creation of the garage at our homes and the enlarging of our homes. People have become less and less communal. Your house is your castle where you pull in and you shut your drawbridge, which is also called your garage door, and then you get out and you go inside and you don't see anyone. Where used to when people, they would get up and they would walk into their house and neighbor, hey, Jim's home, Bob's home, whatever, and like, yeah, come over, have some dinner later. We'll sit on the front porch and play bluegrass or whatever, I don't know. Play the spoons. That's how I would play spoons. Y'all need me to lead worship one day is what needs to happen, right? Stu's like, don't do it, don't let the man sing. I'm not gonna. So maybe like try to figure out how to do things in your front yard rather than your fenced-in backyard. Pretty simple. And watch as other kids maybe in your neighborhood or other people, and just engage with people. It'll be tough. Some people will be trying to shut their drawbridge, and you're like, hey neighbor. I'm way over time, so whatever. There's a study that was done of this church in Colorado, in Denver, Colorado, and the pastor took a network of churches, and they went to the mayor of Denver, Colorado, and they said, hey, we want to make the community better, and we don't care what it is, like short of sin. We are going to partner as churches and a network of churches to do whatever you, the mayor, wants us to do. Whatever you think is best, we're going to do it. And he said, here's the deal. Here's what you can do to make this city and this community better. You can help your people be better neighbors. Because what they've discovered is when people actually take care of their neighbors and serve their neighbors and actually be neighbors to their actual neighbors, the entire community improves. And so don't let your house be a castle. Don't let your house be a castle. Don't let your garage door be a drawbridge. So here's what we're doing here as a church. Compelling community is a core value of ours. And so groups are really family. I mean, that's what it is for us. And so what we're going to do this year is we're going to have 8 weeks with our winter/spring practice, which is going to start in February. We'll do 8 weeks of meeting every week with our groups. And we're going to work through the practice. So we're going to actually develop a rhythm of community, which is one of the practices. And in that, we're going to develop the practice of prayer in our lives and strategically look at how ways that we can inject that rhythm into our life. And then the other thing is, so that will be 2 times a year. And then the other thing is today, directly after the church, one of the ways that we engage people that are different than us is we engage different generations, right? If you study the demographics of our area, what you'll discover is that it's basically 93%, give or take a percent of here or whatever, is white Americans. So it's a really challenging thing to be in a community where it's that and then have a whole lot of diversity just because the statistics don't fit that. And so you have to actively engage that. Well, one of the things that we can engage very easily, doesn't matter, is that multi-generational. Because we know that the older generations lived in a different cultural context than we did, and on down the line. So as we gather together across multiple generations, we can actually learn things from the other generations, as we talked about. So we're going to do that directly after the service. We're going to meet downstairs if you'd like to do that. You're responsible for your own food. Just go out and get some and come back, and we'll hang out. And I have some questions that we're going to pass around to some of our older generation and going to have some discussion around learning from one another, because what we desire is to create rhythms where we're deepening our relationships that we have. And maybe this will be an opportunity for some of you to start a rhythm of engaging new relationships that you may not have that can be helpful and beneficial for you. And this is what Jesus did. This is how Jesus lived his life, and what we're about here is the way of Jesus. Okay? Let's pray together.